Hello everyone. In this video we will be talking about the 4 rules of gun safety. Safety is by far the most important aspect of firearms ownership and handling. And if you only take one thing away from this project, it should be the lessons covered in this video. With that said, let's go over the basics of firearm safety. And a quick note, today I will be using dummy rounds. They look like this. They are completely inert and there's no way that I can fire these. Rule number 1 is treat every weapon as if it is loaded. Even if you just put it down for a second and are sure it isn't loaded, you still need to treat the weapon as if it were. This means that every time you handle a firearm, you are making sure you are following all the rules of gun safety and clearing the firearm every time you pick it up. At first this might seem like a lot to remember, but as you handle firearms more, it will become second nature. So how do we check to make sure the firearm is unloaded? First, remove the magazine. This will be different depending on what type of gun you have. On this gun, the magazine release is this button right here on the left. After removing the magazine, rack the slide to remove any rounds that were in the chamber. The chamber is this area right in here, and that's where the rounds will be sitting when they're ready to fire. To ensure the chamber is cleared, you should either visually or physically inspect it to make sure that there are no rounds in there. For visual inspection, you are going to look into the chamber to see if there are any rounds still in there. Usually it'd be pretty easy to tell when there are no rounds in the chamber because it will just be a dark hole. In this case, I put one of our dummy rounds in just so that you can see what it would look like if there were a round in the chamber. Now, what if it's too dark to see into the chamber or you want to make extra sure the gun is safe? You can physically check by putting your pinky finger into the chamber to feel for any rounds that might be in there. And for comparison, this is what the chamber will look like when it is empty. And again, when I reach in there, I should be feeling that the chamber is completely empty. Now that we are sure the gun is unloaded, we can move on to Rule 2. The second rule of gun safety is never point a weapon at anything you aren't willing to destroy. This isn't meant to scare you, but to convey just how important gun safety is. By design, firearms are tools meant to destroy things. And when a bullet comes out of the barrel here, it will destroy whatever it hits. This is why it's so important to always be sure the gun is pointed in a safe direction and never point the barrel at anything or anyone you aren't ready to destroy. This might seem like common sense, but muzzle awareness, or knowing where your gun is pointing, is actually one of the hardest rules to master and is something you should always be keeping track of. Rule 3 is, keep your fingers straightened off the trigger until you are ready to fire. Many modern guns come with some kind of mechanical safety, but not all do, and even mechanical safeties can malfunction. The best way to ensure the gun will only fire when you want it to is by keeping your finger off the trigger until you are ready to fire. The best way to do this is by putting your finger up here along the frame, and every time you hold a firearm, you should practice putting your finger up here until it becomes second nature. Many people's first instinct will be to grab the gun and then put their finger into the trigger guard, which is this piece right here, or right onto the trigger. But again, you should make sure that every time you pick up the gun, the first thing you do after clearing it is to put your finger up here along the frame. Rule 4 is know your target and what lies beyond it. Bullets have a ton of force when leaving the gun, and many things that you shoot might slow it down but won't stop it. This is especially true of paper targets, but also applies to things like walls and even metal depending on the type of round you are shooting. When you are at the range, always know what is behind your target and make sure you are shooting with a proper backstop. At the range, this will usually be some sort of berm, but it is also important to keep in mind at home when handling your firearm, because if your gun were to fire for some reason, a wall won't be enough to stop that bullet. Finally, while not a rule of gun safety, it is important to always make sure that you are handling firearms with a clear and sober head. If you are in any sort of altered mental state, whether that be due to drinking or any other potential cause, it is important not to be handling firearms at all whatsoever during those times until you are back to your baseline. To recap, the 4 rules of gun safety are: Rule 1, treat every weapon as if it were loaded. Rule 2, Never point your weapon at anything you are not willing to destroy. Rule 3. Keep your finger straight and off the trigger until you are ready to fire. And Rule 4. Know your target and what lies beyond it. If you follow these rules, you should be able to keep yourself and everyone around you safe while handling firearms.